Hey, everybody, welcome in a new edition of the Drew Goodman podcast. Glad, as always, that you are along with us today. Really excited. We have Jon Morosi, JP Morosi, who is one of my favorite guests. He is so knowledgeable on everything in sports, but particularly baseball, hockey as well. Tremendous writer, tremendous broadcaster for Fox Sports. So JP's coming up in a little bit. But first, our sponsors, Huntington Bank. They are terrific. They are opening up a branch seemingly on every corner in our wonderful state. They take care of the customer. They're friendly. They're knowledgeable. They have great products as well. You got to check out Huntington Bank. And we're presented by Huntington Bank proudly, home of early pay. You get paid up to 2 days faster, and there's no cost. Colorado, it's your money, so stop playing the waiting game. More at huntington.com/yourmoney. Direct deposit and eligibility requirements apply. That's huntingtonbank.com as well. And Steel, S-T-I-H-L, steel.com, steelusa.com, I should say. And Steel USA is where you will find every tool imaginable to help your property be as perfect as it can be. Hedge trimmers, blowers, chainsaws, small and large. You want to prune a tree, they have these fancy extension products that can help you do that. They got everything. It's that simple. They really do. And that's why the pros use them, and you should as well. STIHL, steeldealers.com is where you'll find the nearest dealer to you, and there'll be one very, very close. I promise you that. Steel USA is where you go to go shopping, and you can have your product ordered and waiting for you when you go to your nearest steel dealer. That's STIHL, steeldealers.com, steelusa.com as well. All right, let's get rolling. We'll start in football. We'll segue back to baseball. Want to get you to that interview as quickly as we can. The Broncos win. They're 7-2. I said this last week. I think I said it on a couple of other occasions. You are what the record says you are. 7-2 is outstanding, tied for the best record in the National Football League. Now, if you are looking for style points, are the Broncos the leading team in that regard? Probably not, but they have found ways to win. The latest being that victory down in Houston, 18-15. Bo Nix didn't have great numbers. Bo Nix showed up late. Bo Nix's legs showed up late, and they rode a very good defense, particularly their red zone defense has been outstanding this year. And they were able to survive, and they'll have to do it a few more times without the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL, Pat Surtain. They played well. I mean, they played really well. Now, I know C.J. Stroud went out earlier. Davis Mills is just okay. Can't beat you with his legs, but doesn't matter. They're an NFL team. They had a very formidable defense coming in, and the Broncos, again, found a way. So kudos to them. Now, do I think the Broncos are the best team in the NFL? I do not. Do I think the Broncos are one of the 3 or 4 biggest threats to win a Super Bowl? I'm not there yet either. But I think you have a resilient quarterback. I think you have a quarterback that's able to push delete and move forward, which we all have to do in life, but particularly if you're a professional athlete, particularly if you are a professional quarterback, you need to push delete and move forward. Something we always say about baseball players. You can't change the last at bat. Now you're in the box again. Forget about whatever transpired before that. So the Broncos in a real good spot. They're in a real good spot at 7-2 after 9 games. You know who's not in a good spot? Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, and the University of Colorado. So a little more than a week ago, they get blown out at Utah. I mean, they got their doors blown out in the first half. It was embarrassing. These are words that are easy to come by, but they were also regurgitated in the aftermath of that game in Salt Lake City by their head coach. Well, a week later, at home against a pedestrian University of Arizona team, you're looking for the quick bounce back. You're looking for a team playing with emotion and passion, with anger coming off of what took place in Salt Lake City the week prior. And what'd you get? You got another blowout at home, no less. turnover after turnover, big play after big play, and the game was over at halftime. Talked to a good buddy of mine who was up there. He left at halftime, and he was excited so he can get home and catch the rest of Game 7 of the World Series, which was a far better product, I need not tell you. So we are now 2 2/3 years into the Coach Prime era. We know what took place in year 1, all the fanfare, the marvelous start. Year 2, riding a very good college quarterback in his son, Shedeur Sanders, an otherworldly player in Travis Hunter, and complementary pieces. They won 9 football games. And Coach Prime and those kids deserve a great deal of credit. Now it is the post-Hunter era, the post-Shedeur era, and we were told that there's even better talent up there, that they're going to win. I mean, there's a lot of slogans that have emanated from Boulder since Prime took over. He's not short on slogans. He's not short on bravado. He's not short on confidence. But here we are, well into this 2025 season. And it's somewhat perplexing because they played a very good Georgia Tech team, as we've come to learn, off their feet in week 1. They were very competitive against a good BYU team. These are top 25 caliber teams. But instead of getting better, which is the true measure for any team, especially in football, especially when you have a relatively new group, because he's gone in the portal, is more than virtually any school in the country, and you're talking about 50 new players every year. And you'd hope as they play together, they get better. They've gotten worse, and decidedly so. Getting blown out at Utah, and Utah's pretty salty, but getting blown out at Utah in the fashion they did, and then coming home in front of a sellout crowd in Boulder at Folsom Field and getting embarrassed by, again, a mediocre University of Arizona team. They're heading in the wrong direction. And now the onus is on Coach Prime. And one thing we've learned with him is that, at least so far, young kids seem to gravitate toward him. And he's been able to recruit, especially in the portal, very well. He hasn't signed a whole lot of high school kids, and maybe that philosophy will change. He doesn't do in-home visits, and that will be scrutinized more going forward if the lack of success continues. They have 3 games left. I don't know if they'll win any of them. And then a whole lot of questions will be asked. And it's way too early to say, boy, this is now an abject failure. I'm not going there. But enough with the Gold Jackets coaching, and enough with the confident speech. I'm not saying you shouldn't be confident, but everything is in results. That's the bottom line. And the results are not there. They are not there. And unless we see a big 180, I don't know if they're going to be there through the rest of November. So that was, thoroughly disappointing. On to something that was not disappointing at all, the World Series. The World Series was fantastic. Whatever superlative that you want to thrust in the direction of the 7-game World Series between Toronto and the Dodgers, they all apply. I mean, it was marvelous theater. There was the Game 3 18-inning affair that was riveting. There was great individual plays. There was a Game 7 where it also went extra innings. The Dodgers used their entire rotation in that game, with Yamamoto becoming an all-time great in just his second Major League postseason, pitching on 0 days rest and going nearly a full 3 innings. He ends up winning 3 of the 4 games for the Dodgers. It had everything. That catch by Andy Paz, are you kidding me? And he had just been inserted into the game. because I don't think Kike Hernandez with his back turned, I don't think he's making a Willie Mays catch there, and it's ball game over. Isaiah Kiner Falefa, maybe if he dives head first, maybe he's there a nanosecond earlier, game over. I mean, there were so many instances. And then, guys that you don't expect to go deep. Miggy going deep for the Dodgers when he hadn't played much. He'd only homered off of one other right-handed pitcher, I think, all year long, and that was a position player in a blowout situation. But Miguel Rojas becomes heroic, tying up the game, and then Will Smith in the 11th, and yet Toronto, had loaded the bases earlier. They get the leadoff double by Vladimir Guerrero. By the way, how great a hitter is Vladdy Guerrero? You always heard about it, but to be able to watch it for 7 straight ball games as opposed to seeing some highlights from afar, I mean, he's one of the 5 best hitters in baseball. I don't think there's any question. And how clutch. Bo Bichette, playing with the damaged knee, kept coming up with big hits. I mean, everywhere you turned, the Stars, performed well. There were so many storylines. It was a great, great World Series. Now, I'll share with you that I threw out there on social media, which, most places in social media is, can be the bottom of the drain, so to speak. But I threw out there that this World Series was great for baseball, among other things that I said about, just being, wonderful to watch. And though most people were in lockstep with me that it was awesome, and so many people watch worldwide. We'll talk to Jon Morosi about that coming up here in a couple of moments. But there was some pushback, because there's always pushback, right? And the pushback was, oh yeah, it was wonderful. The Dodgers won again. The Dodgers, who have a payroll in excess of $400 million, and that's not even counting the fact that Ohtani's money is deferred. How good is it? It's not good at all. And there's going to be a lockout in a year. And there was some negativity sent in my direction. I'm used to that. It's the nature of especially Twitter, or X, if you will. It still was damn good for baseball. There were people who were watching baseball that don't ordinarily watch. There were other athletes. There were other talk show hosts. Stephen A. Smith, I know he says, I'm a Yankee fan. He grew up in Queens. But Stephen A. Smith, you could tell, he was locked in. And I'll just use him as a quick example. There were so many people from the world of sports and beyond that were riveted because it was great sport theater. And that in itself, forget who ultimately won, that made it great for baseball. That people said, man, this is entertaining. Remember, a lot of people a few years back said, baseball's too long, it's too boring, this, that, and the other thing. Well, they have speeded up the game. We've had a million conversations about that. Credit to Rob Manfred for implementing that. And you had an 18-inning game. I know it went 6 hours and 39 minutes, but it moved. It was compelling. The whole series was compelling, and it brought a whole lot of people in. And the numbers, not that this is always a comparison to the NBA or whatever else, the numbers for the World Series dwarfed the numbers that the NBA Finals did last year. And I love all sports. I want to see everybody, doing well. But that was tremendous for baseball. Forget that the Dodgers ended up winning, because they almost lost on a couple of occasions. It very easily be a parade in Toronto this week as opposed to one in downtown Los Angeles. So spare me. Oh yeah, it was horseshit because the Dodgers ended up winning. Dodgers have been there for a number of years. And I know of late they've won 2 in a row, first time since the Big Red Machine in the National League in 75 and 76. They've now won 3 of the last 6. I get all that. But prior to that, they were getting the postseason, but they weren't winning. And there are a number of other teams, that have come close. It's not just simply about the almighty dollar. There's a lot to be learned. That's why I've said this, for Rockies fans out there. Yeah, the Rockies and virtually every other team not named the Yankees or the Mets are not going to spend like the Dodgers. But it's not just the free agent spending. It's all the other areas that they excel in. Do you know right now they are, and this is kind of a unanimous thought from all the entities that judge farm systems, Baseball America, ESPN, Baseball Pipeline, MLB.com, that the Dodgers have, with all the moves they've made the last few years, they have the number 2 farm system in baseball. They're really good at developing guys. Emmett Sheehan was, I think, a 6th-round pick out of Boston College. He was heavily relied upon throughout the second half of the season and throughout the postseason. So it's not just, oh yeah, they went out and signed Shohei for $700 million deferred, or they were able to, sign Yamamoto from Japan. They're a destination, not just because they win. They're in Southern California, great weather, great history. You're always going to battle that. But they do a lot of other things really, really well. And contrary to what many of you think, oh yeah, you love the Dodgers. How can you love the Dodgers with the Rockies? I was pulling hard for Toronto, quite frankly. I really was. Because as much as I like a number of individuals with the Dodgers, beginning with their manager, Dave Roberts, who I consider a friend, Mookie Betts is wonderful, Freddie Freeman, wonderful. They have a lot of good guys. But overall, yeah, I don't like rooting for them, but I respect the hell out of what they've done. And it goes way beyond just the free agent dollars that they've poured out. All right, let's get to our interview this week. It's a guy that I have immense respect for. He's so good at his craft, and his craft. He has a lot of tools in his belt. He's a wonderful writer. He's a wonderful communicator. He loves the sport of baseball, and in addition to the other major sports as well. So I always cherish the infrequent opportunities I have to talk to JP Morosi. And I think you're really going to enjoy his commentary on a number of subjects. And naturally, we begin with where I just left off, the World Series in 2025. Jon Morosi from Fox and also MLB Network. JP, I know we always want to put things in certain files, and we want to throw around superlatives. That World Series, though, was magical in many ways. How do you look at it now that it's been over for 48 hours?
Drew, first of all, thanks for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it. I look at it in 2 different ways. Number one, the sheer, just the beauty, the madness, the ups and downs. There were a number of things that happened in this World Series that you would say would never happen again, that you never would have expected them to happen. You even go back to Game 3 and what Bo Bichette thought was a walk and Varsho thought was a walk and some miscommunication. Who knows how that unravels in different ways and creates maybe an alternate universe, if you will. There were so many pivot points. The world got to know who Will Klein is. Not a lot of folks knew that when the World Series started. Unlikely heroes, some very likely heroes with the likes of Yamamoto. And I think, too, Game 7, any World Series that is truly a classic, I think, has to go 7 games. And then when you've got numerous iconic plays, the tying homer from Rojas, the go-ahead homer from Smith, the chance to score in the bases-loaded situation for the Jays, the way that the World Series ends with, as Joe Davis said very eloquently, the World Series could end in the next swing, either by a home run, by Toronto, or by a double play. Of course, we know what the result was. The Rojas play to get Kiner-Falefa at home, the catch by Pages. I mean, you could just go down the list of moments that you never thought we would see, and yet we did. So I look at those just absolute. You no matter whether you're watching this game at home in Maine or in Hawaii or Japan or the Netherlands, you're jumping up and down because you just can't believe what you're seeing. So that's number one. The second part, Drew, is, and I'm lucky to be involved in our podcast through the Hall of Fame and XM Radio on the road to Cooperstown. And I often go back when I have the privilege of talking with Hall of Famers you go back to moments like this, Drew, and say, okay, how many Hall of Famers were in this particular series at this particular time, or players or moments, managers who have a really historic claim on the game. One of my favorite series in this light to talk about is the 04 NLCS, not the ALCS, which was famous in its own right, but the NLCS that year was a historic series in its own right. Pujols and Roland and Edmonds and La Russa. And then on the Houston side, you had Berkman and Biggio and Bagwell and Clemens and Pettit. So you start, oh my gosh, and you're like 10 deep of significant people, figures in the game that you really care about. And I think, Drew, in this World Series, we'll feel the same way. If we're having this conversation 20 years from now, Lord willing, we'll go back and say, wow, Dave Roberts' Hall of Fame credentials got a lot stronger in that World Series. Will Smith's Hall of Fame credentials got a lot stronger in that World Series. The world got to know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a different way. Bo Bichette in a different way. Max Scherzer still going at age 41. We know that Betts is a Hall of Famer. We know Ohtani's a Hall of Famer. We know Freeman's a Hall of Famer. We know Kershaw's a Hall of Famer. So you start going down the list and you're saying, oh my gosh, we saw something real with people that we care about in the game. Don Mattingly as the bench coach of the Blue Jays. I could go on. So Drew, for me, it's the two tracks. It's the absolute roller coaster. Can you believe what just happened? Emotion that we all had numerous times, especially in Game 3 and in Game 7, also in Game 6, also in Game 1. And then it's the overarching nature of this. When you revisit this World Series and we pull it back out 20 years from now for the 20-year anniversary in the retrospective, and they gather the people around, hopefully they're all in the deck chairs at the Oda Saga, and say, wow, that 2025 World Series was something. I think we're still going to feel that way 20 years from now.
Yeah, you did such a great job of encapsulating everything that took place. And I do think for it to be, in that pantheon of great World Series, you do need the characters or the great players of the era. And, you start with the Dodgers, their first three in the lineup, typically all Hall of Famers. Will Smith steps up. Dave Roberts has won 3 now. I mean, we all love Doc, right? That puts him probably on the front door. He's in, right? I go back also to that 18-inning affair. And one of the things that's intoxicating about baseball, first of all, the pitch clock has moved it along, and I don't want to go down that street. I think it's been marvelous, and kudos to Rob for getting that pushed across. But that 18-inning affair, depending on where you were taking it in, at least in our country, it's really late at night. And whether you're a baseball person like we are, or you're a casual observer, you couldn't turn away. You couldn't say, that's it. I'm putting my head on the pillow, because you don't want to miss out.
It was iconic. And I think, Drew, as well, the viewership numbers to pull out even further and further. I just saw that the numbers that Sportsnet shared, I believe, if I'm quoting it correctly, 43% of Canada was watching Game 7 of the entire country. Okay. That is like, I think, bigger than a Super Bowl rating in terms of on a percentage basis. It's remarkable that realm in Canada used to be reserved for Olympic gold medal hockey game territory, right? The 72 Summit Series and Henderson scores. That's like a national moment. And so Canada felt that way. Japan also felt that way. So we can sort of look at the numbers and the Nielsen ratings, as you and I both know, they matter, but they tell part of the story. And I think the larger point, and I would challenge anyone to sort of fight me on this point, because it's almost impossible to argue. So I'm cleverly picking a point that's almost difficult or impossible to actually tangibly combat. But I really believe this, that more people are engaged and care about the Major League Baseball product around the world than ever before. Because you might have said, oh, yeah, well, look at what the ratings were for Carlton Fisk in 75. Okay, yeah, but I'm not sure that we had a strong Japanese audience at that time, or that almost half of our neighboring country was watching that game. And so when you consider the growth of the game, the business of the game, whether you're selling ads, streaming service, whether it's in the continental US or whether it's in Canada, Japan, wherever it might be, it's a global marketplace. And I'm looking at this, to me, Drew, and saying, just anytime you do this multiple times a year, just look at the outfield signage at Dodger Stadium and ask yourself how many of those companies are based outside of the US. And you say, wow, the investment, the partnerships, the number of people that care about this game and Major League Baseball, in my view, has never been greater. And I think this World Series, truly global, Canada, US, Japan, Latin America, you name it, Korea, of course, the World Series ends with Hae-Sung Kim playing second base for the Dodgers. Countries cared about this in a very deep way that I think whatever you look at, local, national Nielsen ratings, which were great, by the way, that only tells part of what is, I think, an extraordinarily positive story.
And my take on it, and I think anybody involved in the game was saying this was great for the game. Mm-hmm. I got a little pushback because naturally on social media, one always gets pushback.
Sure.
That was the and you know where I'm going with this, JP. That was the Dodger element, especially being out here where everyone in this region loves to hate the Dodgers because the Dodgers outspend virtually everyone. And that was where the pushback was. So my question overall, Dodgers won back-to-back. First time since the Big Red Machine in the National League. You'll have to go back with in the American League to the Yankees in the late 20th century. Are the Dodgers still okay for the game based on at least how they do it financially?
Yes, they are. And I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. Number one, and this is the irony of the way that we look at games, and there can only be one champion. I get that. But if Dave Roberts doesn't put in Andy Pages and it's Tommy Edman on a sore ankle trying to go way above into left field in a ball that no center fielder has ever been expected to catch in the history of the game, are the Dodgers any better or worse for baseball based on that one outcome of one play if the Blue Jays then become World Series champions, or if Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's lead is one step better? Are the Dodgers any better or worse for baseball if that's the case? I mean, I'm kind of picking a couple points, but that's what I'm sort of arguing, that the stars that the Dodgers have elevate the game. The standard they set of what you have to spend to elevates the game. And I would say this, don't we think that teams like the Phillies, who gave the Dodgers a real run in the division series, or the Blue Jays, that they have to bring in superstars, which both of those teams have done, because they know they have to compete with the Dodgers? That's the mark. And it was said, Drew, 20 years ago in the early 2000s. I remember because I was a college student in Boston at the time when the Red Sox were trying to keep up and they were trying to trade for A-Rod, which of course people forget that Boston tried to do that first. But the Red Sox were desperately trying to keep up with the Yankees. Well, wasn't that good for baseball that the Red Sox were desperately trying to keep up with their rivals? And if the Yankees' mark was here, everybody else was trying to hit it. And so I'm sure there'll be people a lot smarter than me, Drew, to try to figure out, okay, what's the economic structure of the game? I don't know how that's all going to net out. But what I think is the Dodgers being the Dodgers made other teams like the Blue Jays spend more and be better and look for different advantages, which they have done. And they came within about this amount of beating the Dodgers. And so the outcome matters. Obviously, it matters to a whole ton of people. Millions of people care about the outcome, but the stage and the competition are what I look at to answer your question. And I do not see a problem with the Dodgers being the Dodgers, because the Dodgers being the Dodgers made the Blue Jays better, made the World Series greater, and I think is showing teams as they enter the offseason. The message is not that the Dodgers, by the way, are this unbeatable force. No, it's if you play the game the right way, you can beat them. The Blue Jays could absolutely have beaten them. We all saw it. And I think if anything, it gives teams, and it should give teams, owners, GMs, players, managers hope that if you do things the right way, you can beat this team.
I believe it means more. As you know, I'm from New York originally. I remain a lifelong Giant fan. When the Giants beat the '07 Patriots and the 2011 Patriots, even though that league does have a ceiling, if you will, in terms of they have a salary cap of some form, it means more when you have a team to shoot for. And right now, in the era that we are, it's the Dodgers. For many years in the 90s, it was the Yankees. So if you knock them off, it had greater meaning, it had greater value. I think that's wonderful for sport.
Yeah, I agree, Drew, and it's an excellent point and very well said. I think we're going back to another sport that's dear to both of us, especially you in the NBA. I remember going back and with NBC getting the rights again, you go back and watch some of the montages they did back in the '90s, and I still remember the final send off that Bob Costas gave after the Bulls won their last championship, and he very eloquently talked about that the Bulls were this behemoth, yes, but that their story was reliant upon the other great teams of the era. And they needed the Jazz. They needed, at different times in their era, Lakers, the Blazers, the Knicks, the Pistons at one time, the Celtics in the earlier part of the 80s. And so you needed to have those great foils and the team everyone was shooting for. And the Rockets had their moment too. I'm testing my NBA knowledge now a bit, but the point is that you had to find a way to compete with Jordan. And when you beat him, it meant something. And I think that's what I remember feeling as a young writer in the early 2000s, just out of college. That Yankees-Red Sox rivalry was something the likes of which I'm not sure we're ever going to see again. And part of the reason why was, yes, the history, but also it's because the Yankees had Jeter and A-Rod and Posada and Williams, and for a time Clemens, people that Red Sox fans really wanted to beat. And you think about the market where you work and the Avalanche Red Wings rivalry. You need to have a nemesis. Rivalries are what make sports fun. And so I think that I don't know if it's 1 versus 29 right now, but the Dodgers do have that quality to them, and more than anything too. And this is probably the thing that fans of the other 29 teams don't want to hear, but the Dodgers have a lot of really great people. Okay, like you and I know because we're there and we get to work with them. But Dave Roberts is as classy as they come. The superstars on that team are pure class. And I think that probably in some ways, again, fans don't want to hear us say that because they want to be able to have them as the villains. But sorry, there are a lot of really great professional people there that are just really excellent at their jobs. And it's really hard to beat them.
They have great sports humility, and you're referencing off the top Freddie Freeman, naturally, Mookie Betts. You won't find better people if they were your next door neighbors. Doc is the same way, and yeah, they can be the villain, but if you're around those guys, they're eminently likable. I want to take you to another guy on that Dodger team. Can we properly articulate, not just from a baseball standpoint, but in the greater universe of sport, individual and team-oriented sports, how unique Shohei Ohtani is historically?
Drew, he gave us in that month 2 of the all-time greatest postseason games ever. On base 9 times, of course, in the clinching game that he had in the NLCS. Extraordinary. And yet, and again, I haven't interviewed him since the end of the World Series, but I'm sure he'd probably in an honest moment say that the peaks were very high, but that he would like for the other games to be a little bit better. And that's probably the scary part. The scary part is the Dodgers won that series. Obviously, Game 3 was extraordinary for him, and then he starts Game 7 on the mound. But that he probably feels like he could be better. Like that's the scary part. But he's doing things that no one's ever done. Probably the greatest player in totality to ever play the game. And I thought, again, the Fox broadcast at different points in the series did a great job of just documenting how, okay, the starting pitcher just went out there and pitched great. Now he's going to come in and bat. It's just put on his, as Joe Davis said, go into the telephone booth, change, and come back out and do the other part of his job. So it's a really remarkable thing to witness. And I think just as impressive in a different way was what Yamamoto did. And there's a reason why in the winter of Shohei's joining with the Dodgers, which again was really important and transformational, and we're still talking about the history of that. There's a reason why they spent $300 million on Yamamoto. And I think we just saw what a special young man he is, young, emphasizing he's 27, but he is a winner with a capital W. And if you look at, I was calling up his bio and things he's achieved in his career already. He's basically done it all, Drew. I mean, he hasn't won a Cy Young yet in Major League Baseball, but he's World Series MVP. So he's 2 for 2 in World Series rings the 2 years he's been here. He's won the World Baseball Classic, won the Premier 12, which is like the second biggest international tournament. He's won the Olympics. He's won the Japan Series. He's won the Sawamura Award 3 times in a row, which is their version of the Cy Young. He's done it all. And again, it's Randy Johnson-esque for him to come in and pitch Game 7 in relief. Just a real selfless decision at a time where, I think in sports, there are plenty of cynics out there that talk about the money and different things like that. Well, the money is already decided there. He's doing that because he wants to do that for his team and to put his body on the line. And that's pretty special when you see it. So then I think that, listen, the Jays on their side, let's be clear, they were doing the same thing. Bo Bichette playing on one leg. George Springer, I don't know how he was playing. I don't know how he was getting out of bed, let alone playing baseball at that point. So just really professional efforts. I mean, 2 teams that left it all out there physically, mentally, emotionally. I think that's why you saw such raw emotion, Drew, from the Blue Jays after the game about how much they loved playing together. That felt like I love hockey. That felt like a hockey series in terms of how much the physical and emotional toll was for everybody. And that even includes Shohei. I mean, like to start on short rest, which he had never done before, there was a lot of really gritty things that happened in that series. We talk about superstars, but the superstars on both those teams showed a lot of grit. And I think that, I hope, is the takeaway message that young people have around the world. That yes, it's great to be talented, but these 2 teams got to where they arrived because of the character of their people. And it's a shame someone had to lose, Drew, because I think you had 2 teams that really, I thought, represented the game extraordinarily well.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many instances where you were left wide-eyed, and I love the hockey comparison, something very close to you because you cover that sport so well, additionally to what you do in the baseball sphere. But yeah, you had pitchers. I mean, you talk about, we make a big deal if a guy goes out on 2 days rest, or
right,
if a reliever pitches 3 consecutive days at some point. My goodness, for Yamamoto to throw 90-plus pitches in 6 innings after the back-to-back complete game, which is unheard of in this day and age, and conjures up images of the great Sandy Koufax, who was in attendance, and that was wonderful theater in itself, just seeing him closing in on his 90th birthday. But Yamamoto, 0 days rest, as you said, when RJ did it, 20 years ago, something else. I want to segue, if we could, because I know your time is limited, to news we got today. And this is also close to you because of, one of your many hats you wear, and that's your Hall of Fame podcast. The Hall of Fame announced today that the contemporary baseball era will look at 8 names. And the most prominent 2 names, at least for me on there, are Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Has their time potentially come where they will be enshrined despite their attachment to, what?
Right. Drew, it's a great question. And I think we are about to find out and get some real data points on this, to where obviously they've now been off the writer's ballot for a sufficient amount of time. They're being considered now by the ERA committee. And what's new about this is you have to hit a certain standard to be able to be considered on future ERA committee ballots. And so if the makeup of the committee, and I stress, and you and I have both been following this for a long time, the makeup of the committee is everything, right? In terms of how favorable of a hearing are you going to get? Now, obviously, I'm not involved in choosing the committee, nor am I involved in the committee itself. So I'm looking at it from a bit of a remove in this respect. But there's no question that when players have come up in the past and they've been considered for a particular era, it's important that the perspectives of their peers, meaning the Hall of Fame players who were on that 16-member committee, of which you got to get three quarters of the votes. Okay, you've got to get 75% of the 16. So you really need the player group, because it's not just players. There are some executives, historians. It's basically like half and half players and non-players that are in that room. I'm using general terms here, but you have to have the players advocating strongly. So the question comes, which of the peers of Clemens, of Bonds, will stand up in that room and say they need to be in? And that's, again, if someone you and I both know well, and I don't know this, is Jim Leyland in there? Leyland, of course, managed Barry Bonds. I can't speak for Jim, but Jim would be able to give a closer opinion on this than if it was, let's say, Carlton Fisk, someone who didn't play with Bonds. And obviously Fisk, he was in the American League at the same time as Clemens. But the point is, depending on the generation of the person that you're talking about, you're going to get a different hearing for that player. And so the question, Drew, it's a great one. I still think they both face a bit of an uphill climb because of just the way that the people that are part of the Hall of Fame tend to regard as what they want to preserve as the image of the Hall. It's obviously not full of saints. That's different. But there is a certain, I think, decorum, sportsmanship, character, whatever you want to call it. And I'm someone that by the way, full disclosure, I've voted for Bonds and Clemens when they were on the baseball writers ballot. That's been my take on it. But the people that are in the Hall, they look at it a little differently than I do. And by the way, that's okay. It's for them. They're in it. And I think that there's going to have to be some strong advocacy by some people in that room that make a very clear case as to why they need to be in. And I just think the standard and the bar is so high. At the same time, Drew, there's going to be some people in that group that are, from a standpoint of just the relationships and the way they're viewed within the playing fraternity. For example, Dale Murphy, one of the most beloved people in the game in the last 50 years, you could say. And I'm sure there'll be people in the National League during that time. If, let's say, there's a Greg Maddux on that committee, or a Tom Glavine, or a John Smoltz, or a Ted Simmons, people that would be familiar with that era and Dale's career. Maybe someone says, listen, he was a back-to-back MVP, and also, oh, by the way, in terms of character clause, one of the greatest gentlemen the game has ever seen, right? And so that maybe becomes part of the conversation too. You can only vote for a finite number of people, True. So I think that if you're a member of the committee and you're listening to the players speak, you think to yourself, okay, if I want anyone to get in, you're almost predisposed to siding with the players and their voting block, because the players have such a big voice. If they decide they want someone in and they're like, all right, all 6 of us are going to vote for this dude, then all of a sudden the standard starts to get a little bit easier for everybody else to support. So it's a fascinating room. I have never been in the room, but it's one of those things where there's a lot of, that is like the ultimate closed door meeting that I'm not privy to. But I think those dynamics, whenever the panel comes out, Drew, and they do announce it, the people who are on that panel, you can start reading between the lines and saying, okay, I think this person will probably argue for this person. You start to almost, it's like trying to guess the Supreme Court, how they're going to decide something. It's anybody's guess, but it's a fascinating thing to think about.
I am really pleased that there are names, as we were discussing, that are going to have another opportunity, because I'm like you. I know it's a slippery slope. But if you ask me, and I've been asked this many times, which means you've been asked many times, who is the greatest hitter that you've seen in your lifetime? I can't, I saw the very tail end of Willie Mays. My dad, loved Willie Mays, the Henry Aarons, going way back, right? But of guys that I watched with, you and I played in college a little bit, and Barry Bonds is the greatest hitter I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And so I'm saying, okay, if we're going to celebrate in the beautiful hamlet of Cooperstown, New York, this game, there has to be a way to tell Barry Bonds' story as one of the greatest players of all time. And oh, by the way, there were implications. The same thing with Roger Clemens, because his resume doesn't speak to a Hall of Famer, it shouts Hall of Famer. So
Right.
I'm glad that there's an additional body that can get together and look in there's a different electorate, if you will.
Correct. No, and I think too, one point I always like to make, Drew, to people and baseball fans on this exact topic. And I'm really fortunate I get a chance to go to Cooperstown usually a couple times a year for work. And I put work in air quotes because it really is. It's like a pilgrimage. And I'm just grateful to be there and to do it. But one thing that's important, and I stress this to anybody that goes, if they're bringing their kids to go play at Dreams Park or just going on a Cooperstown trip, is to go through the museum part, because it is the Hall of Fame and museum. The museum, there's actually a display about the steroids era. Okay, there are artifacts of Pete Rose there. So there's the hallowed hall, and then there's the museum. And I think it's important to look at Cooperstown through both lenses. This is the place where we honor the greatest to have ever played, and this is where we tell the story of the game, imperfections and all, right? And I think that dichotomy has to exist. The museum part is essential, where they really do a good job, Drew, in my opinion, of talking about not just the beautiful parts of the game, but the difficult parts of the game, the discrimination, the segregation that went on in the game. It's all there, and it's important to know the history. And so that's where I always say to people that go there, it's also, yes, it's for the celebration and the nostalgia, but it's also for the education. We need to understand as a social institution what the game has gone through, what our country has gone through, what our country is still going through. There are elements of this that I think are, baseball can be an essential prism through which you understand American history. And I think it's important to grasp that. So I always make the point that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and Pete Rose, their careers are already noted, and I don't know if you'd use the word celebrated, but they're there. They are memorialized in the Hall of Fame museum, even though they don't already have a plaque and a day on the dais of the Clark Sports Center. So that's why it's tough. These are decisions that are difficult. How do you weigh out? In my case, I've always said I'll vote for the players that were not suspended by MLB, because I feel like that was a murky time. Ethically, we knew what the right and wrong was, but was it being penalized? No, it wasn't. And so I look at those that were suspended under the MLB policy, like A-Rod, like Manny Ramirez, like Ryan Braun, like Palmeiro. They're different for me than Bonds and Clemens. And that's how I've thought about it. It's not it doesn't make me feel great all the time, Drew. I think about it a lot, reflect on it a lot. But that's where I've landed. And it's going to be a really interesting task for those 16 people to think about it here just basically more than 1 month from right now.
Yeah, let's be clear. Baseball also, turned its head when it needed to resurrect the sport with all of the work stoppages of the 90s and the great race between Sosa and McGuire, because, clearly, they were aided, if you will, by, illicit substances. If I may, very quickly,
Sure.
2 questions.
Sure.
And they're completely unrelated, which is
great. I love surprising unrelated questions. I ask my kids questions like this all the time.
Yeah, exactly. My kids are a little older than your children right now. My kids are adults, my boys. Yeah. But first of all, what will be the biggest off-season baseball story as we embark on 2026?
It's a great question. I think when you consider this offseason, I'm not sure that we've had recent years where it's been the offseason of Ohtani, the offseason of Soto, the offseason of Judge. I'm not sure we have a player of that tier. I think it's more about, do we see the big market teams how close are they able to position themselves to the Dodgers? In other words, are the Yankees going to go out and sign a Kyle Tucker? Are the Mets going to go out and trade for a Tarek Skubal at whatever the cost would be? I think it's sort of how emotional and desperate do we see some of these teams like the Mets that missed the playoffs entirely, the Yankees out in the division series. How do the Red Sox build on what they've done? The Phillies with all the free agents they've got is how do the Blue Jays respond to this, to losing by the narrowest of margins? So I think I love Kyle Tucker as a player. Schwarber's great. We've got now a couple more players, actually 3 more significant players we believe will come over from Japan. Imai, who's a really good starting pitcher, and then Kazuma Okamoto, who's a really good quarter infielder, right-handed batter. Kind of reminds me a bit of a Vinny Castilla, kind of that style. And then Munetaka Murakami as a lefty bat. So 3 significant players from Japan coming over. So I think the market and the fascination with Japanese baseball continues as we get towards the WBC. So to me, it seems like it's a few subheadings of the big question, which is who's going to topple the Dodgers and which of these teams makes the biggest step in that regard. Kyle Tucker is going to be a huge domino. I agree. I also think that the trade market, if the right guys are out there, if Skubal's truly available, if Mackenzie Gore is truly available, Sandy Alcantara again, there could be, I think the pitching, especially Drew, on the trade side is more appealing than the free agent side. So I think we could see a really robust move towards the trades early on in the offseason. So that's kind of my 30,000 foot. Who's going to challenge the Dodgers? The collective group of Tucker, Schwarber, Pete Alonso being able to opt out, of course, that sort of power bat conversation, the Japanese talent coming in, and then does anyone really have the prospect capital that's required to get Tarek Skubal away from the Tigers? It's sort of, I think, I look at 4 or 5 different starring roles for the offseason right now.
I'm going to sneak one quick one in. Can
Sure.
you, being who you are and thinking deeply about a lot of subjects, especially pertaining to the sport we love, baseball, is there a happy place for 2 entities that have always had such a contentious relationship, the Major League Baseball Players Association and the ownership group?
There is, and there should be. And I would point out that even as difficult as the last round of bargaining was, they got there eventually, right? And so they were able to get there. So
at what price is obviously,
right.
what we're talking about.
Sure. And it was a long off season. It certainly was not the best way to go about it, probably. But at the end, there were no games lost. And I do think that Commissioner Rob Manfred, this will likely be his final CBA negotiation as the commissioner. I'm sure he would love to keep going his mark of never losing games on his watch. I think that would be a huge win, obviously the pandemic aside, but that was out of his control, obviously. So I think that to me is probably his charter. Let's find a way to not lose games. And then I'm sure on the union side of things, there are some ways that they probably would like to see things move a bit more efficiently. And again, I think even within the ownership group, there's a way to sort of try to find to maybe come together between the big market and the small market, the mid-tier. But the takeaway that I have, Drew, is that the game, when you look at the World Series that we just had, and I realize Toronto is also a large market. It's representing the whole of Canada. So it's, in some ways, it's the biggest market, right? Because that is all of Canada is in their territory. In Canada, relative terms to any U.S. city, is a big place, okay? So when you consider all of that, if you watch that World Series and saw how it ended, saw the amazing viewership in Japan, Canada, and the U.S., I just don't think you could watch that as a product on the field and say, you know what, we just got to change the whole thing. I just don't. That doesn't make sense to me, right? It just doesn't. Are there some ways to improve it? Of course. To make smaller market teams and mid-market more competitive? Of course. There are ways that can be adjusted. But the notion that the entire enterprise is flawed, I don't buy it. I mean, I watched for a solid month some of the best baseball I've ever seen in my life. So I just don't see how that argument really makes a ton of sense. And believe me, there are pathways. We saw teams from Detroit, Milwaukee, Cincinnati all make the playoffs, Cleveland. So you're in the conversation. And I do think and I'm sure we'll have a lot of different conversations about it during the course of the offseason, Drew, but that's where, if you are Tigers, Guardians, Reds, Brewers, if you're in that middle tier and you got a chance to go for it, I think you got to go for it. You got to take, when your shot is there, you've got to take it, because the Dodgers can credibly say, yeah, 10 out of 10 years we'll be in the playoffs. They're one of one. The Yankees maybe, but there are not a lot of teams that are that way. If you have a chance, if you're coming into a unique opportunity, the Brewers with all their talent, this is your window. And I think that's, if anything, it's how do you capitalize on your windows when you got the chance? And that is the charge now, Drew, of 29 other teams as we start the offseason. How can you get at least a little bit closer to being competitive with the Dodgers?
Yeah, very quickly, you mentioned a number of mid-revenue teams that did very well, led, of course, by Pat Murphy's Milwaukee Brewers again. For a club like the Rockies, it's not just, the Dodgers spend this much money. There's a lot to be learned about their infrastructure, how they go about player acquisition beyond the dollars, the free agent dollars, and how they develop, because historically they've done it better than everyone else. And that is not all attached to having extremely deep pockets. And it's important for people in the sport and the people who follow the sport to understand that.
Right. And it's a great point, Drew. Resources show up in different ways. And by the way, we talk about Toronto a lot. Toronto right now, between what they've got in Dunedin and what they've got in Toronto at Rogers Center, best in class, beautiful infrastructure. And as you know, Drew, players are smart. A lot of them have played in different places. They go from one place to the next. They have very elaborate offseason training regimens and places. They know what quality looks like, and they know if you're giving them quality or not. They're smart. You can't fool them. And so when they know, when they say, oh, wow, my family's being taken care of, this is first-class travel, it's first-class training, massage, strength and conditioning, mental health, recovery, maximum performance, all those things. They know when they've got it, and they know when they don't. And the better you are spending on the infrastructure in the minor leagues, to me, it makes no sense to bring in players, pay them their signing bonus, then say, okay, here you go, low A, go get them, and then just see how they come out in a couple of years. That doesn't work anymore. I don't think it ever worked, but it really doesn't work now, because you've got teams like the Dodgers and others that are able to develop their own, and they really are shining in a pretty powerful way. Teams that have, whether it's pitching labs, hitting labs, next level analysis for their players, programs specialized, that I think, Drew, is what I've noticed in the game. And I think it's healthy. Players are different. You have to differentiate your instruction between a player who came out of the SEC and is 22 versus someone who was signed at the age of 16 and is new to our country. They're different people, different life experiences. And so if you can't find a coach and interpreters, performance coaches, again, I'll mention the mental health side of the game, because when you're there at single A and you're by yourself in a new place and you're getting evaluated every day and you're seeing your rankings on Fangraphs or MLB Pipeline, whatever, dropping, and you're worried about how everybody's looking at you, you need to be seen and supported with not just coaching, but the support and all around. And I think the smart teams, Drew, we're seeing them really spend on the minor league people infrastructure, the building infrastructure, and I think those that are investing in their player development are being rewarded for it at the major league level.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. All right, I'm going to leave you with this, because it is the time of year where I get to be just a fan. And I am an enormous fan of a team that you mentioned earlier, and this is a sport that you cover as well, and that's the NHL, and I'm referencing the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I'm a New Yorker. I was a Ranger guy growing up. 94 was awesome when Messier, led them to the elusive cup, if you will.
Right.
But the Avalanche, led by two of the greats really of all time already, you could say that with McKinnon and Makar. they will land where when we all have this conversation, JP, in June?
So great question. I think that the Avs, and I'll full disclosure, this is about the week of the year where I start to watch more and more hockey now that the World Series is done, but I have been following carefully. Tell you what, the Central is a tougher division than I thought. The Utah Mammoth, your new neighbor, is moving in the neighborhood. They're pretty good right now. They just signed Logan Cooley. So now do I think the Mammoth could beat Colorado in a 7-game series? Probably not, but Dallas I think is really good. I think that's a tough division. So I tend to think that the team coming out of the West will likely be Dallas or Edmonton if they can finally get over the hump. So I tend to think it's going to be one of those two. But I love Colorado. I love the way Makar plays. I think they'll also get. I think McKinnon certainly will get that boost from being part of Team Canada at the Olympics, which is going to be an amazing first time we've seen best on best in the Olympics in 12 years. So coming off of the Four Nations, of course, which was an amazing experience.
Unbelievable theater.
Brilliant hockey. So I think that, and Devon Taves, I love watching him play too. So like the Avalanche have a special group. And I think they're as good as anybody else. I just think a little bit of advantage Dallas, maybe a new coach kind of helps them get over the hump, or Edmonton finally wins one for Canada. I say Canada because, goodness, they almost had a World Series champion. They're still waiting for that first cup since '93. And I still think the Oilers, if they could just get the goaltending figured out, Drew, that maybe the Oilers will be able to win it all for Canada this year.
Well, you talk about a hometown discount that Connor McDavid gave Edmonton.
Big time.
Kidding me?
You know, Drew, I make this point, and again, like we'll at some point in time, probably never. Maybe the economics of sport will be more of my immediate concern right now, and I get to just watch and talk about it and comment on it. But I have said this to people in my orbit. I said, how much sense does it make that by way of NIL that you have starting college quarterbacks making more money than Connor McDavid? I don't get it. so that's where we're at. I'm trying to figure that one out, Drew. So as soon as you get an answer on that one, you let me know. But that's my big head scratcher of the fall is how does this happen? But Connor obviously wants to win, and I give him immense credit. Obviously, again, there's the question of getting the last dollar versus making your team better by having resources under the cap to get other players. I got one thing to say. If you're going to sign him to that, you better get the man a goaltender. If it's not up to par by the trade deadline in the NHL, you better find someone to be in net because that man's ready to win a cup.
Yeah, no question. JP, you're the best. Wonderful job covering the postseason. Continued success. We tell everybody where you can. I mean, there's so many places people can find you, but if you don't mind, give yourself a plug.
Sure. Well, thanks, Drew. I appreciate it. And thanks for the conversation. Yes, back on as we're having this conversation Tuesday, November the 4th. We are back on with Hot Stove. It'll be beginning this year at 10 a.m. Eastern time, 2 hours live every single morning, every single weekday morning, talking about the greatest game there is. So we're just so grateful to be back with that. A lot of World Baseball Classic coverage coming up. So I'm at Jon Morosi on X and on Threads as well. So it'll be a busy offseason. I got some hockey planned too. So really, really grateful, Drew, to be busy and really, really appreciate your friendship and the opportunity to be on the show today as well.
Yeah, you're the best. I love our conversations. They're infrequent, but when I have them, it's very special to me. So I appreciate you taking some time to come on as you play Mr. Dad today.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate all your help. Have a great winter time, and we'll look forward to catching up real soon.
You bet you. Take care, JP. Huge thanks to Jon Morosi. As I was telling you beforehand, it's always wonderful to pick his brain about a variety of subjects. Could have gone on for another 45 minutes with Jon at some point down the road. We'll pick his brain once again. So big thanks to Jon Morosi. That's all for this week. We'll do it again next week, I'm sure. Rockies still have not made headlines yet in terms of who they've hired. I'm sure it's coming in the not too distant future as who will be the next head of baseball operations for the Rockies. But it's one that is of great importance naturally, and I'm sure they want to make sure they get it right. And perhaps that's why there has not been an announcement as of yet. But I'm sure it's pending in the next several days. All right. As I said, we'll do it again in a few. Take care. Stay well, everybody. Talk to you soon.